Okay, so I was going to go back through and redo all the videos that you guys have missed because I've had problems with my computer. I got it fixed now. I can make things work. That's why you're seeing this video, which is amazing. But then I realized the videos didn't work, and then I go, well, I could just redo them. But then I'm like, no, when I do something, I kind of get bored of it. I don't want to do it again. So um, if you missed it, I'm sorry. You can ask me questions. we, we've been talking about Genesis, started in Genesis 1, been going all the way through. We're up to Abraham now. So going forward, I'll start putting some videos on. But this is something totally different because technically I'm not going to, we're not going to be have Bible study this weekend because I'm going to be gone. So I'm actually giving you my message that I had prepared with kind of that, but really it's more of I mix that with a rant. You know, I like my rants. Everybody knows me. I like ranting. but um, but you know, basically, we're talking about Abraham right now, but I'm not gonna talk about that. I wanted to skip ahead and talk about a few other people. And the topic of this, I guess, is stop blaming God for things that are your fault. Um, people don't like to hear that. I watching this movie recently with my wife. We were watching David. It's late '90s movie, and it's just interesting that the whole theme through this whole movie was God was, judging him for, whatever the case may be. And so David makes these bad decisions like sleeping with somebody else's wife and then killing the man and then taking his wife, and marrying a lot of other people too in the process. And he makes all these bad decisions, and he's constantly saying, oh, well, this is the judgment of God, not really taking responsibility for his own actions. Even, I mean, he, his kids start to get older, and he's really not raising them the way he should. He's not a good father. Like God had said, he's a man of war, a man with blood on his hands, and he was not the type of person who really connected with his kids. And you see that when one of his sons does something horrible to one of his other daughters, and he doesn't really deal with it right, and it starts a rebellion. And basically, his other son Absalom takes away the throne from him for a while. Horrible story. I mean, the whole thing, it's just really tragic. But the movie, and this is what bothered me about it, constantly David's blaming God for everything. And it bothers me. I don't like that. So much of our society, we blame God for everything. Now, with all the things that have happened recently, especially, it's really horribly sad with Boston and what happened there, and the people that were hurt and injured and dead. I mean, that's just horrible. And the first thing that comes out of people's mouths always is, well, what about God? Blah, 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 blah. And they start trying to mix God into this, and it's sad because people do that with all these different things. Instead of stepping back and realizing that we live in a very violent time, very, very violent, and we can't blame God for that. Sometimes we've got to actually just own up for the people that we are. And I've realized that this is not really that popular of a topic, but step back and realize, I mean, our violent society has brought about the lifestyle and the way that we live. I was talking to somebody last night, and I think it's funny because we were talking about airports, going to be going to airport pretty soon, and I said I might as well just walk in naked. I mean, they don't got to worry about anything. I'm not a terrorist. I'm not going to blow anything up. Okay, let me just get on my plane and go on my way. But you got to take this off, take that off, do this, do that. Have them scan your body where they see exactly what you look like. I mean, it's ridiculous what we basically subject ourselves to because of what we think is security. And I think I've said this before, it's worth repeating. Anytime that you trade in freedom for security, you're just taking one step further to just a police state. I mean, to where everybody's just giving up all their liberties, all their freedom, so that we can be protected from this enemy or this thing that's out there trying to kill us all the time. And it's ridiculous. And that's basically where we live. We live in a violent society. I mean, it's funny because I'm not gonna get into whole gun control argument, whatever. I mean, I think it's stupid because the government doesn't have the right to come in and take everybody's guns. That's my opinion. I personally don't like guns. I'm not into guns. I'm not, I think it's stupid when people try to defend their right to go out and shoot an animal. I think that's just ridiculous. Oh, I need them to shoot my animal because you can't go down to the grocery store and buy your own meat. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize we live in a post-apocalyptic society where we have to go around shooting animals to survive, but whatever. But really, my opinion on that, I think it's just, I don't think it's right for the government to come in and take our guns. I don't think the government has the right to do any of those things. I'm very anti-government when it comes to things like a lot of things. But I think it's just so funny because what's the first response out of people's mouth? Oh, well, they're going to come here. You'll have to pry it from my cold dead hands and all, I have enough guns. It's like, come on, dude. But that's just our first response to almost everything is violence. It's constantly like, I'm going to violently, try to stop this thing. And it never works. And it's funny because then you take the teachings of Matthew, where Jesus basically says, turn the other cheek, to pray for those that try to hurt you, despitefully use you, that, to give to those that ask. And I mean, it's funny because it's so foreign in our society. But you see constantly through history as well as in the Bible where people are brought into this amazing freedom, or brought into this, freed from this oppressed country or oppressed situation, just to end up becoming that thing which they originally fought against. There's a story that we're going to be getting into soon, and I'll get more in detail in it, but I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a teaser here. Joseph is an amazing story in the Bible about this man that, his brothers, he kind of thought he was hot stuff, and his dad made a nice little technicolor coat, and all his brothers were all mad about it, and he kind of walked around going, well, yeah, I had a dream, and I saw all you guys bowing down before me and all this stuff. And it's like, he's running his mouth. Well, he ends up getting beat up and thrown into a pit and then sold to Egyptian slave purchasers. And they basically take him to Egypt and sell him as a slave. So he's in Egypt. He's, basically working, and everything starts to get better. He starts to do well, and then something else happens, and then he gets thrown into jail, and everything, seems kind of crappy for a while, but he gets the chance to interpret Pharaoh's dream. And when he does, Pharaoh sets him up as basically second in command only to him. Now, I've said this before, anytime, this is why I'm against power or archal type societies or systems where people are set up in power over other people. Because anytime you put somebody in power, power will corrupt them. That's the bottom line. I mean, perfect power corrupts perfectly, or whatever the saying is. I mean, basically, if you put somebody into power, they're going to abuse that power. It's all through history. That's the way it works. So you have Joseph now as a man of God, hearing from God, blessed by God, prospered by God, put into that place, by God. So what does he do? Well, the Pharaoh comes along and says, well, now that you've told me, the dream was basically that there's going to be these 7 years of famine and all these horrible things. So Pharaoh's like, what are we going to do? He goes, well, I'll take care of it. So he starts taxing all the people. Starts taxing them, starts, taking all their stuff and putting it in, big giant silos or whatever, and which was fine, he was saving up. Well, he starts taxing the people. Well, they start, getting to where, hey, we don't have anything else and we need some food. Well, what does Joseph do? Does he start giving them food? No, he doesn't. He starts saying, okay, give me your land. And they give him his land and all that, and as time goes on, it's like, okay, well, I guess you're going to have to sell yourself into slavery then. I mean, you see this like, whoa, Joseph, this is kind of harsh. Now, Joseph's family shows up. Now, being the great man that he is, what does he do? Well, he takes all the best of all the land of Egypt that he took from all the Egyptian people and gives it to his family, just like a normal ruler or leader would do. And it's funny because most people read that story. You probably heard it before, and you're like, I never got that out of it. Well, because I'm crazy. I like looking at things a little differently. What ends up happening? Well, eventually a Pharaoh rises up that doesn't know anything about Joseph, and he goes, hey, this little system that one of these past the rulers set up, I'm going to do the same thing. And then guess what? That's exactly what happens to the Jewish people, and they end up being slaves. So you say, okay, well, that's horrible. Well, God comes down, frees them, sets them free. And sets them up in an amazing nation, just peace on all borders. Everything's going great. And here comes Solomon, David's son. And, he builds this temple. Everything's wonderful. And time goes on, and you start reading all the different things about what went on. And you read about the forced labor of Solomon. And you're like, whoa, wait a second. And it wasn't the Jewish people. No, not his own people. He didn't force them. And it makes a big deal. He didn't force them. He forces all the foreigners. Well, the interesting thing about it is those foreigners end up coming back and destroying Jerusalem and putting them in slavery again. You see the cycle. You put somebody into power, they abuse that power, they force slaves, and then little by little, it just starts happening again. And here we go. United States of America, the land of the free, as long as you're a white landowner, I guess. And the same thing happens again. And it's just sad because, constantly you see through history where people are put in this power, they oppress other people, and then that power is overthrown and somebody else is in power, and then they oppress the people. There's one of my favorite games of all time is Red Dead Redemption. Amazing game, absolutely worth playing. And there's really kind of a neat mission where you're down in Mexico and you're basically helping the small band of rebels overthrow the Spanish government that's set up because they're oppressive to the people and all that. So you help them out, you help the guy out, you get him set up, and then as time goes on, you find out he ends up being just as bad, if not worse, as the Spanish government was with oppressing the people. That's the problem with power. Jesus says, if you want to be the greatest of all, you're the servant of all men. That's an amazing thing. You want to set yourself up, then serve everyone. It doesn't, and it's funny because people say, well, what does that mean? Well, that's what it means to you. I mean, God's going to talk to you and say, hey, do this, hey, do that. Set yourself up in a situation to where if you're ready to serve people, then you have the heart that God wants you to. So now, why is it that when we see these things in the Bible, we see that, power corrupts people. We see that violence isn't the answer at all. At all. No way, shape, or form. There's no such thing as a justifiable war. There's no such thing as justifiable homicide or whatever. There's no such thing. It absolutely doesn't exist. You can try to philosophize with me, try to argue with me. I don't care. Bottom line is violence is wrong. Violence is wrong in every situation. And here's my rant part of it. Violence is wrong. Bottom line, end of story. Jesus, as well as the Bible, has always taught a culture of life. Everything was about life with God. It was about life. It wasn't about death. We were the ones that brought death into this world. We can try to point the finger at Satan or anybody else we want to. Bottom line is we made that decision and we still live in it today. We still choose death over life constantly. We still try to find ways that we can bring death into other people's situations instead of bringing life. And even as Americans, I mean, gosh, we act like we're like this great nation. We're bringing this wonderful thing to all these people. It's funny because my daughter was just learning about a lot of things that went on during the 60s and 70s with Latin America and Central America and South America and all this, and the fruit companies and all. And it's just interesting. And she got to learn about chi, which is amazing because, a lot of people don't know much about it. But anyways, so she kind of had an interesting, from reading all the stuff, and I didn't say anything to her, and she was reading the stuff, and she goes, well, it kind of seems like America just wants to make people do what they want to protect their own interest. I go, yeah, that's basically what it seems like we do. You got oil? Yeah, sure, we'll send some people over and take over some governments, blow some things up. Why not? You don't have any of that kind of stuff, like in Africa? We don't care about you guys. You can cut each other's hands off, kill each other all you want. But it's a violent society that is built on violence. So, of course, everything that we're going to experience, you're going to see violence after violence after violence after violence, and that's what you're seeing. And the only change, we think that, legislating things is going to change things. That's not going to change things. And Jesus even said that. People thought, the Jewish people of his time and his disciples are like, oh, you're going into Jerusalem. You're going to overthrow the Romans. You're going to set yourself up as a world ruler and take it over. And it's interesting because that's even what the devil tempted Jesus with. He said, look, all of these kingdoms belong to me. I will give them to you right now if you just bow your knee. And so, but Jesus wasn't there for that. Jesus didn't come for that. He was trying to change their hearts, because that's the only way you're going to change a nation or a people is by changing their hearts first. We have to change our hearts. We have to change the way we look at things. We have to stop being people of violence and death and make the change. We got to stop being oppressors. We got to stop being people that are so bent on just oppressing people and getting our way and being able to, be right all the time, that we are right in this situation, and just, we're not. We're wrong. This is wrong. Violence is wrong. Oppression is wrong. Turning the other cheek, being the servant of all men, that is right. And people try to say, well, how is that ever going to change anything? I don't know. Maybe ask Gandhi. He's dead, but talk to him someday. Ask him. How did that change anything? How did nonviolence ever change anything? Martin Luther King? I don't know. You might be able to ask him. I mean, the sad thing about it is that all we know is violence. So it's so foreign to us when we try to look at things in another way. Everything we do, even to the way that we eat. And I'm not going to go there because I don't want to. I've already probably alienated enough people. But the point of what I'm getting at is I look at men like Joseph, I look at men like Solomon. These were men that God spoke to. These are men that God used. These are men that really, I mean, God had a plan and a purpose and a place. And all of them made wrong decisions. Why? It's because they put themselves up in a place of power. And instead of using that for good, they turned and used it for evil. Why? Because that's what power does. Um, I like using the term Christian anarchy, and I know I don't like throwing it out because even people that believe in Christian anarchy don't like throwing out the term, because once you put a term on it, it doesn't explain anything. I think that when you read Matthew 5, 6, 7, and if the world lived by those principles, and we don't need people to tell us what to do. Well, all we need is Jesus. That's it. The Bible even says you don't need teachers. You get the Holy Spirit that'll teach you. You know, we don't need buildings that people go to that we call churches and have some guy stand up in front, as this great leader to tell us exactly what we need to do. I'm sorry, we don't need that. Now, if you feel that's what you want to do and that's what God, that's great. That's wonderful. Do it. Enjoy it. That's amazing. But ultimately, it comes down to you doing what God wants you to do. And sometimes you got to stand up against things that it might be uncomfortable. It might be uncomfortable to live a life of nonviolence. It might be uncomfortable to be the servant of all men. It is. But you know what? The bottom line of it is, in the end, it's going to be worth it. And it's a lesson that I've been learning now for a few years. It's not an easy lesson. It's not an easy lesson to, and I find it's interesting that you end up alienating yourself from people like Christians that you think would be on the same boat as you, that would believe the way that you did, because that's what Jesus taught. But I find so much that people try to rationalize it. Instead of just facing their own sin or their own evil, which it is, it's evil. Violence is evil, and it's a sin, and it's wrong, bottom line. And instead of facing that and dealing with it, we try to explain it away or theologize it away. I made up that word. Instead of just facing it and saying, Jesus, you told me to turn the other cheek, and this is hard. This is not easy. I don't even know how I'm going to do this, but God, I know you can help me with this. You told me that I serve the Lord and Him only, that I don't serve other governments. I don't serve other people. I don't put other people in powers. I don't make idols and worship other people, but I worship you and serve you only. And you show me how to do that. You show me how I can do that in my everyday life. You show me how I can bring life, this culture of life that you taught in the Bible. God, you show me how to bring this into other people's life. And pray like Jesus prayed, because He told you to pray this way. Kingdom of God come. Your will, God, be done on earth as it is in heaven. Heaven on earth. Deuteronomy is 11:20. Days of heaven on earth. That's God's will for us now. It's up to us. We can do it. It's really, it's the ball's in our court. It's time for us to make a difference, to make a change. It's up to us. No matter how small and insignificant you might think you are, you making a decision to live in this culture of life will make a difference. It's kind of like throwing a little pebble in the water and the ripples just kind of go. I mean, you don't even know how many different people, how many different situations, how many different things that you're going to affect when you decide to make that change.